Welcome to Talk Commerce, where we talk about how merchants, agencies, developers experience commerce. This week we interview Willem Wigman with Hyva, however you pronounce it, the revolutionary new Magenta theme that will change your life. Did I say change your life? Yes, this shows how powerful the Magento community still is and continues to be. We talk about the origin of the name. Not to spoil anything, but it's good. We discuss the impact on site speed for merchants and how Google is changing the game for your website and how it's ranked. If you're a merchant, you need to share this episode with everyone. If you're an agency, you need to get on board with Hyva and get your dev teams there too. The Talk Commerce podcast is sponsored by SwiftOtter. E-commerce developers solve problems daily. In fact, some of those seem like mountainous hurdles that must be climbed in a matter of hours. Stress levels can go through the roof. No wonder the plague of burnout affects developers too. But there's a vaccine for that. Investing time in your career will take you farther than you ever imagined. Meet SwiftOtter. SwiftOtter exists to help you become the e-commerce hero that is indispensable and irreplaceable at your company. We do this through Magento certification study materials and Joseph Maxwell's most recent book, The Art of E-commerce Debugging. Go to swiftotter.com to learn more about how you can quickly climb the ranks in your quest to be a better developer. While you're there, use the coupon code TALKCommerce for 15% off any digital goods at swiftotter.com. This episode is sponsored by eWay Corporation, the partner of choice for technology, infrastructure, and enterprise-level digital solutions. An AWS Select Consulting partner. eWay Corporation. Forward together. My name is Brent Peterson, and I'm your host. Please remember to subscribe wherever you download your podcasts. And now, Talk Commerce. Welcome to Talk Commerce. Today I have Willem from Hyva Themes. Willem, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us what you do and what your favorite thing, what your passion is.
Hi, Brent. Thanks for having me on. I'm Willem from Hyva Teams. Should we say recently, over the past year, I've been building a product for Magento, which is a new front end that uses all the things that we're familiar with, the old school Magento stuff that most developers really like, and I ditched everything that was bloated or slow or not modern enough to our taste. So we built a new front end that's fast and fun to work with.
Yeah, and great.
And I started somewhere last June, and now we're full steam.
Wow, and it seems like it just started 2 weeks ago, and you got it done and it's launched. But okay, good. Yeah, I know that is the buzz in the community right now. Everybody's very excited about it. Yissa and I have had a lot of debate over how to pronounce it. And I think we've talked about it on this show at least 7 times. And if I've had 7 different pronunciations. I understand it's a Finnish word, Hyva.
True.
And what the way I do it is I clench my butt cheeks and I say Hyva. And it helps me say it correctly.
Can we see that?
The same way I say Isa.
I had a bit of marketing in my study, and it's one of the first lessons. If you want to have a brand name stick, you need people to talk about it, and the more often the name is being repeated, the better it sticks. So I'm never disappointed if people stay stuck on pronouncing Hyva, but it has more meaning to me than that, of course. I lived in Finland for 4 years, and Hyva has a very positive connotation for it's everything that's positive in Finnish. It literally means good, but also trustworthy and wanted. How do you say? Well, it has a very positive meaning, and we we try to make everything good about the Magento front end, have an enjoyable experience, both as a visitor to your web shop, but also very much take away the pain points that developers have with working on Magento front end.
Yeah, and I know that from what I've spoken to other people about it, you know, a lot of it is, as you introduced it, removing all the heavy bloat that happened in the beginning or happens with the Luma theme, and then just letting people do what they need to do to make it work. Can you give us some of your motivation last June? What made you just like give up on Luma and dive into Hyva, and I guess behind that, what was the energy that you put into it to make that happen?
Yeah, giving up on Luma happened way before that, actually, but it was a long process. Of course, we were all never happy with Luma. Starting with Magento 2.0, we've had quite some issues with the front end. And the one that sticked around the longest was performance issues. And working at Internet, an agency in Germany, I spent more than a year optimizing some of the projects on the front end part, which mainly meant optimizing JavaScript to both improve the perceived performance as a visitor to a web shop, but also very much to have Google accept it as a rankable shop. Yeah, that just kept keeping worse. If you install Luma out of the box with demo data, it's made exactly in the way that it scores okay-ish, but as soon as you start to customize anything on Luma front end, just the amount of JavaScript is enough to well, have Google not accept it. Well, the way dependencies are built into the front end, it just takes very long until your browser figured out what JavaScript should be loaded in and then rendered. And that's a process that you can't really improve. There's just too much JavaScript in the framework. So I felt the pain. Yeah, I remember your question. What drove me to it in June? So that was the issue at hand. What drove me to it is that on my free time, my wife asked me to make a web shop for her, and I didn't want to spend my free time working on Luma. I wasn't too enthusiastic about PWA solutions either. I've seen enough of both of those solutions working at Integer and before. And I didn't want to spend my free time working in that mess. But I love Magento so much, especially the backend developer experience and being a front-end developer. Firstly, mostly, if we go back far enough, I wanted to have a front-end experience that was also enjoyable. So I decided, since my wife only needed a web shop with max 10 products, because she makes jewelry, handmade, so she would make a collection with maximum 12 products. So that would be fairly straightforward. One overview page, no layered navigation, no filters. A lot of things were not needed for her. So I thought, well, let's just see how far I get, because just building a template from scratch shouldn't be too hard. And before I knew it, I had a prototype. Within 2 days, I was sending screenshots to my colleagues in excitement that I had a homepage on a Magento front end rendered with PHTML, PHP layout XML, but with some very modern front end tools from the Laravel ecosystem. So that's still in CSS and Alpine.js. and it was super fast. It worked nicely. I had super much fun. I got so much excitement. At last, I felt excitement again working on the Magenta front end. And within a month, I pitched it at IntegerNet, and we used it on the first project. And so that was around July. Um, they decided to go with the unnamed front end that I had at that time. And soon the next project followed, and the next one, and we built it out together from there on. Last February we had a 1.0 release, which covered most of the features that I considered necessary for a first release. So yeah, it's now it's June, so we have a few more releases under our belt by now. A lot of feature coverage, a lot of response out of the work field. Almost, I think, 90 agencies working with it, so we get a lot of feedback. We see a lot of work being built currently. People are enthusiastic. We're starting to see more and more recurring agencies, so agencies coming back for more projects, either just finishing their first project or still in the process of finishing the first one, but already deciding to continue working with Hyva. So yeah, that looks like a really, really good trajectory.
Yeah, it's very exciting that how a spouse can drive innovation. For example, I was always told I need to wash the dishes, so I innovated by getting a dishwasher, and it made it happen much faster. So I see this in a similar format, that your spouse is driven you to innovate on your own. This faster theme. From a merchant point of view, let's just like point out the need for speed. And then I think looking way back, and I know it's been commented many times that 5 years ago Luma was dead, or even when Magenta 2 was launched, Luma was dead. And somehow it became acceptable that Magenta 2 would load in 4 seconds. And our benchmark was 4 seconds when everybody else's benchmark was sub 1 second or even 2 seconds. For I think the PWA theme is something like 1 or 2 seconds. Can you give us some thought about how that benchmark of 4 seconds kind of made our community sluggish in a way? Like, I feel like just the Luma theme and that nobody else jumped in kind of also made us a little sluggish in what we're doing as developers.
So the issue at hand was one very hard to tackle, because as soon as Magento provides the framework for the front end and defines what the basic tooling is, that's the foundation of everything that's being built from there on. So a whole ecosystem is built around that. Third-party modules and well, the whole basics of building a front end. If you look at any documentation or any tooling that's out there, everything, the whole ecosystem is built on top of Luma. That even Adobe/Magento didn't see easier solution to improve that than to just throw it away and put a PWA headless solution in front of Magento.
Are you planning on having something like the Hyva data sample data set as well now to speed things up?
I don't. You mean as a sample data to install for a demo site?
Yeah, I mean, I think having a Hyva theme with sample data to just let people see how great it is and fast it is would be a really good sort of kickoff to making sure that everybody's adopting this standard. One thing my colleague Derek Harlick is always complaining about is how, number one, sample data and loading in the Luma theme is out of the box really slow, but number two, it doesn't really, it is a little bit too broad, and there's so many things that merchants don't see out of the sample data, and there's things that merchants, too many things that merchants do see. And then from a developer standpoint, sometimes if you just want to load Luma without the sample data, you lose a lot of its functionality because it loads all this other junk that you don't need, which I guess we're going into today, that the one of the reasons Hyva came about was because it doesn't need to load all the junk we don't need. Yeah, so having some kind of a demo install and having a way that people can install it and try it quickly would be a sort of a good next step to get people to adopt it.
Yeah, so for now, if we have a demo instance, we use the default Magenta demo data just to show that the features that Luma has out of the box, that those are also there. I think we're well over 95% of feature coverage. I haven't counted them, but we have a feature matrix linked on our website where you can see every feature, what state it is in. So for the open source version, we're quite far feature-wise. Enterprise we're still working on, which goes by many names. I keep calling it Enterprise.
Yeah, it's Adobe Commerce now.
Yeah, and it's, perhaps it might stay that way for now, for a bit longer. But I mean, everyone knows if you talk about the enterprise product, what it is. We might just be talking about Magento and Adobe Commerce in the future as two products, but different discussion. So we use the default Luma sample data for now. It shows most of the features, but if you look at, for example, the bundle product that's in the sample data, it doesn't really show the different product option types that you have. I think it only shows either radio buttons or drop downs. And the custom options are hardly displayed in the sample data, so file upload and those kind of things. But I think what would be greatest is when that list of showcase websites becomes bigger and people see what has been built with Hyva, because it's endless. The speed in which you can build custom features is much higher than anything I've heard. Agencies are telling me that it goes 30 to 50% quicker to develop custom features compared to either Luma or PWA solutions. So that's massive, and it's. I recently got the feedback after a meetup we did that people are still wary, or they can't really believe yet that there's a front-end product for Magento where people are purely positive about. So I got the feedback like, okay, so more and more people are starting to tell us that it's really good, and we hear not so much complaints. So we're starting to believe that's true. So that's a good thing. It needs some time to sink in. But
yeah, definitely time is going to help us to push this along. So going back to just the importance of a merchant and the speed of your site, or pointing out to a merchant how something like this really affects your Google rankings. Can you just tell us a little bit about Lighthouse and how you use that to give us some of the feedback, or not feedback, give us some of the metrics on how sites load and how important that is, especially in Google rankings?
Yeah, Google basically checks the quality of your page in user perceived performance, how quickly your page renders. And that's not just how fast the server can build the page and send that to the browser. So that would be the server render time, the initial page load. But then the biggest bottleneck that Magento has is that on the front end, usually megabytes of JavaScript need to be loaded, and JavaScript is what pretty much powers interactions in your browser. A lot of the things that are being done with JavaScript can also be done with native browser capabilities. But yeah, we've seen this trend where everything that makes up your front end is now being built with JavaScript. That's basically what the synonym for PWA solutions currently is: JavaScript files building a web page with megabytes of JavaScript, while your browser is perfectly able to build that page without using that JavaScript, or with maybe using 5% of that JavaScript. And we kind of lost track there. Like we had Luma, where we had a lot of JavaScript to build, for example, sliders, and to calculate prices on the product page, and to load in the private data of a customer, so what's in his card and everything. And that all consists of hundreds of files of JavaScript. And that means that your browser needs to download each and every of those files and then put them all together, read them, understand them, and then execute things on the page. So before your browser is able to actually show you the page and then let you as a user click on the things to add something to the cart, to see how many items are in your cart, all of these actions typically require a lot of JavaScript, while those are not needed. Now, Google has become more and more strict on how much data you're pushing through the wire to the browser. And especially if you're on a mobile device and you have 2G, 3G reception, I mean, it happens a lot that you're in a rural area or in a building where coverage is bad. You switch to lower bandwidth speed, and loading a Luma front-end page with such a reception takes much more than 4 seconds. 4 seconds is optimistic if you have a good connection.
Yeah. Let me try to dumb this down for our listeners. And I want to try to gear this to some of our merchants out there who may be listening that would maybe not understand the JavaScript idea, or even understand how Magento traditionally loads. If you think of yourself as going into a regular retail store, at some point you're blocked at the front door because you want to go down some aisle, but it won't let you go down the aisle until a whole bunch of things have happened. So let's just say that the attendant at the front door needs to tell you every bit of information about all the pieces in the store. And so all you need to do is go in and buy some coffee, but it's also the attendant is sitting there telling you how to pick your yogurt, how to pick your breakfast cereal, how to cook your oatmeal, before you could even enter the store, when all you want to do is get to the coffee, purchase the coffee, get out of the store. So in a sense, Luma right now is that attendant at the very beginning, explaining to you all these different things you have to do, filling up your brain, which is now your browser, with all these different tasks that you may or may not need to do when you get in there, and then letting you go into it, where the Hyva theme would allow you to, as you're going through the store, load those items into your brain or into the browser, and then let you execute them at that time and then leave when you need to. Is that a good sort of dumbed down representation of what it does?
That works. Yeah, especially if you think the store would have certain conventions. You know, the fruit is at the start of the shop. It's at the entrance. It's usually there, and you know what a coffee is, and you can go get your coffee. Go get your coffee and go to the cashier and pay and leave. Yeah, without knowing everything that's to know about the rest of the store. Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. Every morning I know what my coffee is, and every evening I know what my beer is. So yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory for me.
Yeah, and then if you're talking about the ranking factors from Google, there's an easy way to measure how Google rates your store. Um, Traditionally, that's Google Lighthouse. It has 6 metrics where it checks how fast was the initial page sent to the browser. Then how long does it take until you can interact with the page, start typing things. There's a bunch of those metrics which are um, moving this month. It's going more geared to just 3 of those metrics, which are called the core metrics. And that's layout shifts, which means that if you load a page, that the first render is stable, opposed to having a page load and you see a product you want to click on, but then the slider loaded on top of that, which pushed the product down that you wanted to click on, and now you clicked on the banner in the slideshow, and you're going to a whole different page than what you wanted. That's layout stability, so that's called content layout shift. The more stable you can get the first render of your page, the better the usability of that is. And that's something that I put a lot of care in, that your browser understands from the moment that it loads the page, it understands how everything should look. And JavaScript has no influence on positioning of things. So either we reserve some space if there's a slider going to be loaded through GraphQL, because we do use those kind of technologies. But if we do, we reserve the space on the page so that initially it's empty and then the slider is loaded into that space, but it doesn't change the height of the entire page.
And CLS is something that I wrote about last year, and it has now become ultra important. I think in May was when Google announced that new ranking, and I think what you're describing is for a merchant point of view would be that the page loads, and if you, even the worst part is if you're on your mobile device, the page loads, and as you're trying to push a button, everything keeps shifting on you. And you're trying to push it and you keep hitting the wrong button. So for example, I've bought many of the wrong nail polish items many times when I really wanted to buy a bike pump. So it was very frustrating for me. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's not a great user experience, and Google kind of punishes you for that. Yeah, those metrics are becoming more and more important. They initially were supposed to push those updates through in May. That's true, but I think they delayed it until last week. The first update went through, and then in July there's another big update coming through, and then from today or this week you should see some changes in ranking, because those core metrics became more important.
So remind us of those top 3 core metrics again.
Yeah, that's and I'm going to peek. So it's the core layout shift, and then you have the largest contentful paint and first input delay. And the first input delay I just mentioned, that's how long it takes before you can interact with a page. So if there's a search form on the page, you load the page, and if you click on the search input, how long does the page need to respond to that click? So how much is happening on the page that needs to be processed before you're actually able to do anything with the page. So ideally, you would want a visitor to come on your page, and as soon as he sees something he wants to interact with, be able to click it. And then the largest contentful paint means how long it takes the browser to to fully paint the page. And painting means it reads the HTML, that's the structure of the page. Then it reads the CSS, and that combines tells the browser how things should look. So what element is where, and what's the visual representation. So that both depends on the amount of CSS that you're loading on a page, but it also depends on how big your images are. If on the first page on the above the fold, if that still exists, if you have a big banner and the banner is 2 megabytes, it means that your browser needs to fully download that file. Often also needs to see what the dimensions of that file are of the image, so it can determine how that page should look. So one thing to improve that largest content paint is to reduce image sizes, make sure that your CSS file is not too big, and for example, give the right width and width and height to an image in the code where you're putting the image on the page. You can already define that it's a 600 by 400 pixel image. Then the browser doesn't need to fully download the image to already know what the ratio is. So it can already reserve the space. So that's all things to speed up how fast your page is being loaded onto the screen. So yeah, Google brought back those 6 metrics that were before to these 3 that are most important going forward here.
I think a good way to describe this to an end user or a merchant would be something like when Magenta 2 first came out, Luma was sort of not cutting edge, but it was acceptable at the time. And as we've progressed through time, there hasn't really been any updates. There hasn't been certainly. Well, it's like you bought a car in 2014 or whatever, and then the car was never updated for the next 7 years. And it didn't include Apple Pay or any sort of features you'd like to see in that car. And they left the engine at the same exact speed, and everybody else is now going faster and better and innovating and growing, while Magento itself is sitting there stagnating.
And your car is entirely made of steel.
Exactly.
Thick plated steel, and it's carrying around some concrete in the trunk.
Right, extra sand.
So, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of true. And what we did was take off all that steel and replace it with carbon fiber.
So can we talk a little bit then about the difference between the approach of, I think Adobe's approach right now is to do headless with a PWA and leave alone or just abandon the existing built-in theme, where your approach is to have a theme that will allow us to still use Magento without having external resources to run your front end. Do you feel like there's a path that's going to happen one way or the other, or do you think that this dual path is a good way to go?
From whose point of view?
Let's say for your point of view.
So I'm sticking to this path. I'm staying with what they call the monolith, which is the one big system that does everything for Magento, which could still use APIs for access services like search, and well, have everything in that one system, which is a system that I love to work with. that there are hundreds of thousands of developers worldwide that know how to work with this, have up to 10 years experience with it, and really like working with this. Even though we're a bunch of complainers, um, we're a big bunch of developers and specialists that really like Magento the way it is, if only the front end would have improved. I had my fair amount of experience with JavaScript frameworks, mainly React. I spent one and a half year at least working almost full time in React, building React components for the Luma front end. So I know enough about the technologies to be able to work with it. But whenever I start working with those PWA solutions that are currently out there, I just don't enjoy the experience. It's not for me. I don't feel that the web by default should be an app. I don't feel that we should be building websites primarily with JavaScript, because that's the other way around. With JavaScript, you're building, you're letting JavaScript pretend to be a web page. While I think at the core, JavaScript was built to do stuff on top of HTML and CSS on your page. It's to enrich your page, to create more interactions on a page, to make things slightly more fancy. But the more JavaScript you add on top of your website, the more your browser needs to digest and try to understand and fetch in extra files, and it's just much more resource heavy, while our browsers only got smarter over the last 10 years. Browsers are fantastic. They can do all these things that we're now doing with those PWA solutions are powered by the browser, not necessarily by JavaScript. And we can build a great user experience using those browser capabilities. And that means Hyva is built in that way that if you disable JavaScript, you still have a fully rendered page. 80–90% of the page just shows and works. It's just when some interactions playing with swatches or the form key validation, security things in the front end are handled by a cookie, and you need some JavaScript to handle that. But that's all very lightweight logic. So that's the complete opposite way of approaching how to build a website. And I enjoy, I feel it's more the purest way, the purest way of building a website. And it's how I got started 20 years ago, building a website in raw HTML and CSS, and it evolved from there. And we got to a stage where we started building apps with Flash. I bet most of the listeners still remember that if you wanted to play a video in your browser, you needed to install Flash. Otherwise, you wouldn't have videos on the website. That escalated to the point where a whole website would be built with Flash. Yeah, and it was fantastic. I loved that time. I loved building those kind of websites because you could build animations and do all these crazy things. But then we stopped doing that for a good reason, because HTML5 came along and JavaScript got better, and we finally got really good performance and nice interactions natively in the browser. And somehow now we again got the idea that it should be an app again. And I think the use case for that is just, it doesn't fit for the entire market, not the entire e-commerce market.
Yeah,
and there is a fit.
I want to key in on that point, and going back to your wife and the fact that she wanted this simple store. And this is directed to Adobe. if they want to still retain that middle market and even the smaller merchants. If your solution is, here's your back end, now you need to build a front end and attach it somehow, and then by the way, you need all these other peripheral items, you're like, if when your wife came to you and said, hey, can you build me the simple store on Magento, you would be like, well, this is going to be really hard, or it's going to get a little bit complicated. Let's just do it on this other thing that has everything in one place, and we can build it and launch it in a day.
Even worse, I was so fed up with the process of building front ends that I didn't want to spend my free time working on the Magento front end. It was either doing something crazy like this or go for an entirely different solution. I didn't want to build a simple shop using Magento.
Yeah, so I think going back to what kind of keying in what you said about how sometimes it has to be simple, and actually this solution, the solution that you've now provided us, doesn't preclude anybody from using PWA. This only enhances it. There has to be an easy entry point for Magento for people to use in a way that you've just described as a use case, and it is allowing people to use it quickly and efficiently. And I think the biggest thing now is that we're not stuck with something that's super slow and renders in whatever 4 or 6 seconds and is going to get increasingly poor Lighthouse scores. And as we know from Magento, is never going to be supported again and hasn't been supported for the last 5 years.
Yeah, yeah. So we're trying to fill that gap, and it's quite a mission, because we want to set certain that future and make sure that in 5 years this is still a solution that works. So yeah, we're building a network of agencies and partners that can assist us in to build this out together, and see if we can get an alliance up and running, where we make sure that we keep taking care of Magento as it currently is. When time comes when Magento sometime in the future says, well, now it's no longer supported. Because I won't let my future with Magento be decided by Adobe, because it's an open source product, and we spend more time with that product than Adobe has. So
yeah, that's a good quote. We've
feel
spent more time with this product than Adobe spent with this product. I think we've all
it's our
done
blood
that.
and tears.
Yes. So just looking into the future, then, I know that you mentioned in the next 5 years. Tell us about Hyva and the commercial aspects of Hyva. How are you organized, and what is your? You have a website which we'll publish on our show notes, but like from a commercial aspect, what are you looking forward to down the line?
Yeah, so first of all, Hyva is a commercial product, as you said. It's a one-time fee of €1,000. That roughly translates to somewhat in $1,000, I think. And with that, you get access to the base product, our library of modules that we made compatible with Hyva. So we're working on making a lot of third-party modules compatible. That's a shared effort. So we have environment where people can work on third-party compatibility modules and vote on which ones should be supported in the future. And the most popular ones we make compatible ourselves. So currently, the team is currently full-time me and Vinay Kopp. Vinay is spending a lot of time on those third-party compatibility modules. So we're making a lot of progress there. We're expanding the team. So at least by the end of the year, I expect that we'll be it currently looks at least 5 people. If I still need to get, yeah, so that's work in progress, but that's definitely, this is not a side project, even though this started as something I did in my free time and then built out together with Internet. This is my full-time occupation, and it will remain that for as long as we can keep the show going, and I hope that's really long. And for the future, so we want to make sure, and we don't want to do that solely by ourselves, but to see if we can become shepherds of Magenta open source together with partners. So I don't envision that will become Hyva, but we want to maintain the product that we're building this on and contribute back there. And we have talks with really big agencies that see the same future for for themselves together with us. So that's awesome. And then there's one really big thing that I personally started building this for. So as soon as this started to take the shape of a product, I knew that in the end, what I wanted to build is a library of components that you can just put into your Magenta team, and it just works. So we're using Tailwind as a CSS framework for, well, everything that you see in the front end, the design part. And there's a commercial product called Tailwind UI, which is a whole set of different layouts for menus and newsletters and page layouts and well, everything you can imagine that you would want to have on your website. You can copy and paste, and it just works, and it's responsive and everything, and it's super easy to customize that to your own design. We want to do the similar thing for Hyva, and then have components that are built to work immediately with Magenta, with our front end. So if you have a newsletter sign-up form, you browse through a few options and you pick the one that you like, and you copy the HTML file into your team, and it just works. So we've laid the groundwork for that, and now we're talking with a really good designer that will start to make nice looking page elements. A front-end developer that would potentially build all those components. Yeah, that's a future goal. Hopefully in 6 to 9 months, we have a first beta version of that. There's interest from vendors, third-party modules, or extension developers, let's put it that way, to create custom teams built on Hyva, and to make their modules compatible, or even build modules especially for Hyva. So I'm hoping we can get a marketplace going there, where you can get extensions specially made for Hyva that look nice and are super performant. So currently we're going for the approach that Luma module can be made compatible for Hyva. So we have documentation and guides how to create a compatibility module or change your original module to also support Hyva, which usually means if you have a lot of JavaScript, the JavaScript needs to be rewritten. So that's not the hardest thing in the world. It's not really rocket science, but you need to understand how things that used to be done with jQuery are now done with vanilla JavaScript, or without using jQuery. And you get a lot of performance for that in return. And usually if you have sometimes we have a module that's a few hundred lines of JavaScript, and then it turns out that you only need 20 lines to make the same thing work. So that's a great exercise. So yeah, that's a bit the future plan. Get complete feature coverage for open source. There's a handful of features that were still missing there, but that went really quick considering we launched last February. The product is not even a year old, and we have way more features than those PWA solutions currently out there. Because we're re-implementing what was already there with Luma. So we can base a lot of these functionalities on logic that's already there in the backend. And we use the layout system and the blocks that already exist. We clean up everything that we think should be cleaner or neater there. But yeah, that's how it looks currently.
Yeah, I'm very excited, and I have spoken to Vinay, and by the way, Vinay has volunteered the three of us to run the 50K race in Heidenheim, I think, this next summer. So I'm excited to do that with you as well.
The 50K.
50K, yeah.
Yeah,
it's in the mountains by his house, so it'll be.
I'll
easy.
join you for the first 5 and the last 5, maybe.
Okay.
In between, I'll be at the side feeding you bananas and drinks, maybe.
All right, deal. All right, so we have a few minutes left. Why don't you tell us what you're interested in sort of reading about books and maybe some podcasts or something like that, and then if you could give us one action item that a merchant could do coming out of this, what would be the important thing that you could give them as an action item?
I think as a merchant, it would be super interesting to see a use case that was presented recently on our first meetup, where Ryan Copeland presented their first project they did with Hyva, and he explains the process of how they managed that project, how they scoped it, how they budgeted it, and how they from beginning to end, how that project went. I think that would be a really good primer for merchants to see what an agency would look for to build a Hyva team. And well, one of the things that he concluded with was that it was the first time since they did Magenta 2 that they ended the project within budget, way within the front end estimation they made.
Okay, so the two takeaways I got from there was that the project was started and ended within budget, and the client was happy.
As a happy, the shop is fast. The developers were happy. The project manager wouldn't believe that the work was done because they only spent half of the time that they were supposed to on the front end. The merchant is happy because they got a good product for a good budget.
And is that recording available on your website? If we can point some people to how to view that presentation?
I would suggest linking it in the show notes, but okay. It's on our YouTube channel. If you look for Hyva Meetup, so that's HYVA and then Meetup. It's the first meetup we had just 2-3 weeks ago. I think that's a really interesting point to get started and start talking with your agency what they think if they're interested in exploring Hyva. Typically, what I've heard from agencies that work with it is that their developers get productive within the week, so they get familiar with the system and don't need long training, long time to get familiar with the system, because a lot of things, it feels like an old code but newly lined. So yeah, maybe start there.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I'll link to that. I'll link directly to that YouTube video, and I'll just point out as to agencies that there is a Slack channel, and that if your developer is saying that they don't understand something, they need to ask questions on the Slack channel. I can just say from experience that some of our developers weren't asking questions, and I just encourage them to ask questions on the Slack channel, and you get answers very quickly. So as an agency, make sure that your developers are asking questions about the theme and how to solve those things. As a merchant, I mean, I think you're right. This is a great solution, and the more people on board, the more developers on board, the faster some of these innovations and components are going to happen. And then as we move forward, the more fun things we're going to be doing on top of this theme.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of innovation built on top of this product. People starting to build entire page builders on top of Hyva, and other really exciting things that I can't speak about yet. But it's happening again. We have excitement that we're doing crazy stuff again. We're inventing things, and we went through the ceiling, and we can do so many things now. So that's amazing. We really threw off the shackles. So yeah, you should definitely join. We have over 800 developers on Slack, and as soon as you're a member, a licensee, then you get full access to support, and there's pretty much always someone responding. At least Fina and I are always on top of questions happening on Slack. But we're often too late because other members are eager to help as well and already provide solutions. So then we're late to the party. So that's a really, really great feeling that, yeah, this enthusiasm is there, and people are.
Yeah, there's so much energy around it. Yeah, I'm very excited. Well, we're actually out of time. But if you could, well, first, thank you. And I think we should follow up in a month or so, just with some of the business things that we could help merchants with and why they should be doing this. And I feel like we just need to keep pounding into the ground or pounding into the pavement that, hey, this is what we need. This is where Magento needs to go, and get everybody on board. I'm very excited. I'm a huge cheerleader for this, for your initiative, and I thank you so much for doing that. As we close out, if you wanted to give one shameless plug about anything you'd like, go ahead and give it right now.
I guess that would be buy my product and become part of the movement. It couldn't get more shameless than that. Yeah, we're trying to build this for the SMB market. We want to keep this going, and I'm super happy with your support and giving this the attention and the airtime. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Great. Thank you. And Willem, have a great evening. And I hope that you don't get made to wash the dishes tonight.
Thank you. You too.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
The Talk Commerce podcast is sponsored by SwiftOtter. E-commerce developers solve problems daily. In fact, some of those seem like mountainous hurdles that must be climbed in a matter of hours. Stress levels can go through the roof. No wonder the plague of burnout affects developers too. But there's a vaccine for that. Investing time in your career will take you farther than you ever imagined. Meet SwiftOtter. SwiftOtter exists to help you become the e-commerce hero that is indispensable and irreplaceable at your company. We do this through Magento certification study materials and Joseph Maxwell's most recent book, The Art of E-commerce Debugging. Go to swiftotter.com to learn more about how you can quickly climb the ranks in your quest to be a better developer. While you're there, use the coupon code TALKCommerce for 15% off any digital goods at swiftdaughter.com. This episode has been sponsored by the partner of choice for technology, infrastructure, and enterprise-level digital solutions, an AWS Select Consulting partner, eWay Corporation. Forward together. Thank you again for listening. My name is Brent Peterson, and it has been my pleasure to be your host today. Please rate and subscribe to Talk Commerce. New shows out every week.